Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello, and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today, I am here with author Lyndall Clipstone. Lyndall is here to celebrate the release day for her upcoming novel, Tenderly I Am Devoured. This has been named a 2025 Most Anticipated Romantasy by Goodreads, and I am personally so excited to dive into this novel. And welcome, Lyndall. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And it's so excited to be celebrating release day with you.
I am so excited to have you on here. Tenderly, I Am Devoured looks like such an incredible folk horror meets romantasy, and I am just here for it. And so for
Tenderly I Am Devoured is a romantic folk horror about a girl who agrees to marry the chthonic god worshipped by her isolated coastal hometown in order to save her family from ruin. But when her betrothal goes wrong, she has to seek help from the son of a rival family and his alluring older sister to save herself from a fate worse than death.
so you comped this novel as Saltburn meets The Secret History.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very kind of all of my favorite things, basically, sort of spooky Gothic houses, weird family secrets, a little hints of dark academia, but with a twist. The main character, Lark, is her story begins where she's sent home after being expelled in disgrace from a prestigious college that she was attending. And so part of her backstory is revealing to the reader what went on there. And a lot of it's based on my own experiences with academia. So this idea of being on a track to have an academic career that you have a very clear vision for, and then what happens when that is disrupted and your whole life is kind of upturned and you have to face a new and uncertain future. So it was very fun to explore that through fiction and to see how the main character kind of figures out the idea of sort of forging your own fate when you've had this very clear plan for the future that doesn't follow through.
I mean, the best way to ensure that life goes according to plan is to have zero plans because
I know. Yeah, and it was really fun and interesting for me to write a character who was someone who had a very, very clear plan for the future. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is how it's all going to happen. Because clearly, like, when that gets disrupted, it's like, oh, great, now what? So,
So why don't you tell me about some of your writing inspirations?
like you mentioned, The Secret History is a very big inspiration. I actually came to that novel by happenstance. I was in Amsterdam and needed something to read on the flight home. So I live in Australia, so the flight back from Europe is like a big long haul flight. And I think I'd read one of Donna Tartt's other books, and I just happened to see it in the English bookstore when I was there. And I was like, oh, this looks all right. I'll grab that one. And it just happened to hit at like the right time in my life. I was about the same age as the characters when I first read it. I felt very seen, especially by the main character, who's this sort of desperate to fit in, desperate to belong to this very exclusive insular group. And Donna Tartt's prose and her way of sort of crafting a story, it's all just been incredibly inspirational for me. I feel like everything I write has little hints of The Secret History in it, but this is definitely my big ode to the atmosphere of that book. And in addition to that, I'm also very visually minded as a writer. So a lot of my inspiration actually comes from movies and TV shows. So a few of my favorite directors are Robert Eggers, big Nosferatu fan, Guillermo del Toro, obviously, Crimson Peak. I think Tenderly I'm Devoured definitely has a lot of Pan's Labyrinth kind of vibes as well. Like the character of Ophelia and Lark are quite similar in a lot of ways. And I also really, really love Sofia Coppola. So I think much like with Donna Tartt, I saw the Virgin Suicides at a very kind of pivotal moment in my life. I was in university still, like still a teenager, and just something about the way that she captured girlhood has always been a big inspiration in my writing because I really love to explore that experience of sort of girlhood and coming of age as well. So, yeah, that's a few of my inspirations. And I think hopefully it comes through in the book. I think even the cover itself has a very sort of pastel, sort of girlhood, dark kind of gothic-y vibe, which I'm very pleased with.
I personally am a huge fan of like Gothic artistry and the idea of kind of just intertwining that Gothic outlook with girlhood is such like a neat aesthetic to me. And that's something that I'm really looking forward in seeing in your novel. And honestly, we just need more of it.
I agree. I feel like it's always been something that I've really enjoyed as a reader and a writer. And I think as a teen, I found particular sense of connection in books that explored girlhood, but also elements of darkness and emotional development and things like that. So it's always, as an adult, I always think back to the sort of books that I really enjoyed as a teenager and that I found made me feel quite seen. So talking about the exploration of girlhood has been, I think it's been something that I've always wanted to explore in all of my books, but Tenderly I Am Devoured is definitely the most kind of girlhood vibes book, I suppose you could call it. The main sort of plot line for Lark is overcoming a very difficult female friendship breakup, which I think is an experience that a lot of young women and young people in general can identify with. So it was fun and interesting. If you can call exploring a friendship breakup fun, it was an interesting character development experience as a writer to work through her emotions with that.
And it's one that is certainly relatable as well.
I think so too. It was, I mean, I went through a similar experience. I had a very difficult friend breakup when I was around the same age as the characters in the book. And I think a lot of readers sadly can identify with that. I think often a friend breakup is even more difficult to deal with than a romantic breakup in a way because it's just this sort of the feelings are just as strong, but the ways of processing it are kind of different. I don't think we have the same rituals of grieving and processing around it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You know, it's something that I've experienced in my life a couple of times as well. And you're right, the way that you process that is extremely different than, say, like a boyfriend or spouse or, you know, something like that, end of that kind of relationship. And in some ways, it can even hurt more and have a stronger emotional toll on you.
Yeah, I agree. And for Lark, a lot of her journey is the, alongside all of the obvious horror and life or death stakes, the way of learning to trust again and learning to fall in love again, and how that is almost scary, and then facing down the wrath of a angry god husband in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to talk a little bit about your writing process. This is something that I love asking my authors on the show and, you know, seeing just how authors approach their writing in different ways. So let's talk about your writing process.
Sure. So my process is kind of, it's evolved over time, mostly due to necessity. Since I sold my debut duology, all of my books have been sold on proposal to the same publisher. So because of that, I've had to have quite a rigorous outline to go along with the pitch of the book. Originally, I was very much a pantser. I kind of missed those days of just sort of sitting down and seeing where the story would take me. But as I've sort of refined my craft, I think I guess you call it like planting or whatever. It's a little bit of both. So I definitely love to start by gathering a lot of inspiration. I'll make playlists or mood boards, or I'll have books that have a very similar feel to aspects of what I want to explore. And that can be anything from a poetry collection to a non-fiction book to a children's book to a literary novel. It's very like random, and maybe there'll be, oh, I want to capture an aspect of how this character feels or an aspect of how the setting feels or something like that. So I'll have all of these little bits and pieces that I'm gathering together that help me get in the mood and get in the headspace of what I want to create. And then I'll create a very rough outline. So generally, I have an idea of the main character, the romance dynamic, because that's one of my favorite things to write. And because I love writing character-driven stories, the romance or the main relationship between the main character and the secondary character is always a big focus for me. So I'll start with that. Generally, I'll have an idea of, okay, this is a couple of loose plot points that I want to hit, and I'll write a very rough outline, but it always changes. So no matter how well outlined something is, it feels like as soon as I start writing, it kind of just has a mind of its own, and it always at very specific milestones. So about 20,000 words in, and then about 40,000 words in, I'll go and everything will feel very smooth. And then it gets to the point where everything just suddenly stops working, and I'll have to pause and consider why and redo my outline. And I don't know. I feel like, especially with Devoured, this was one of the first books I'd written where the characters felt like they had a very strong mind of their own. I'd always heard other authors say things like, oh, my characters told me that they wanted this. And I'd never experienced that as a writer, but definitely with Tenderly I Am Devoured, particularly with the romance, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to have the romance resolve, because there is uh I guess a love triangle. It was a love triangle, or like there was two romantic interests. There's Alistair, who's Lark's rival and first heartbreak, and then Camille, who's Alistair's older sister and Lark's former childhood friend. And I honestly couldn't decide how I wanted to resolve it. And then it really felt like Lark said to me, like, I want a girlfriend. So I was sort of like, okay, well, let's see how I can balance this out. And it ended up becoming a polyamorous relationship. And that felt so perfect for the story. But it definitely felt like the characters made that decision as well as me, which is funny. And it was a very interesting experience as a writer. So that with the characters having an attitude, but also I often make choices in the story based on what feels right, which is very chaotic and imprecise. But sometimes I'll be working on a scene and technically it's all fine. Like there's nothing about it that's not serving the plot, that isn't written well, but it just doesn't feel good. And it'll either be, oh, it feels boring, or it feels unexciting to me, or it just feels wrong. And I'll have to stop and think, what changes can I make? And when I light on the right change, it'll be just a gut feeling. So that's how I know that the choice is needing to be changed. So yeah, that's my process. It's very imprecise and chaotic, but I kind of love the balance of the plot and the craft side of things with the creative wildness and inspiration and gut feeling side too.
I personally think that even though it may be a little chaotic from the writing side, as a reader, I think when authors really just follow their gut and kind of listen to their characters, it really helps to create such a very atmospheric world. And instead of focusing on, specific detailed points on an outline or just an idea and allowing yourself to just kind of go with the flow, it just really creates this vibe.
Very fun when you read a book and you can tell that the author was so in love with the story and the characters themselves. The passion really shines through. And it just makes everything feel so real and lived in. And yeah, I feel honestly like quite emotional about the milestone of the book coming out. I'm very excited for it to be in the world and to share it with readers. But it's like I'm saying goodbye to these characters which have lived with me for so long and been sort of such a part of my life. It's very bittersweet every time a book releases and you craft these very vivid, real characters who had such strong opinions about how they wanted their story to be told, and now it's done and they're out in the world. And yeah, it's very lovely, but emotional too.
So let's talk a little bit about your publishing journey. You mentioned that you first debuted with a duology. So let's go on and touch on those a little bit.
Sure. So I debuted in 2021, which was not the best time to be debuting a book, sadly. um, with a Gothic romance called Lakesedge, which was part of a duology. The second book is called Forest Falls. So those were the story of a girl who goes to stay at a haunted Lakesedge estate and falls in love with the monstrous boy who lives there, and then makes a bargain with the Lord of the Dead to try and save him from a curse. I love those books so much. They were immense fun to write. They're the books I was very lucky and had quite an unusual experience where this was the book that I signed with my agent. This was the first book that I went on submission. So it's really like the story that turned me into an author, I suppose. And I still have people picking them up and mentioning that they read them. It feels like every Halloween, especially, they're very sort of spooky, gothic, full vibes books. People will come to the story, and I love how they're still out there in the world all these years later. Not that 2021 was that long ago, but you know what I mean in
You know
publishing
what?
sometimes.
It
Yeah.
kind of was. Like 2021 feels like a lifetime ago.
It really does. So it was a great experience. As you can probably tell from my voice, I live in Australia, and at the time when I was querying US agents, it wasn't very usual for authors from Australia to be published internationally. I felt very lucky to be picked up by a US publisher, to be able to have a US release. It was a great experience. And I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic was that a lot of the events went virtual. So I had quite a lot of opportunities to connect with readers and booksellers and other authors in a way that I might not have been able to if I needed to be there in person. So it was a very stressful time to debut, but I think there was a lovely sense of connection as well. And then following that, I wrote a standalone dark fantasy called Unholy Terrors, which is the story of a holy warrior who is desperate to find the truth of her origins, and she teams up with the monster that she's sworn to kill in order to enter a haunted sort of no man's land where her mother died when she was born. So I had a very bumpy ride with that book. I hoped it would be my breakout book. It was still one of my favorite things that I've ever written. I really put so much of myself into it, my heart, my soul, all of that. It was very sort of Sophia Coppola, gothic, fantasy, romance, all of my favorite things. But it just was one of those books where it ended up in a very crowded publishing season. It was a very quiet release. Often people don't even know that I've written it. People will be like, "Oh, I thought that Tenderly I Am Devoured is your first book." So poor Unholy Terrors, she's like my forgotten middle daughter, but she is actually getting a new cover and is releasing in paperback today at the same time as Devoured. So I love that readers maybe can go and pick up both of them. They look very cute together, the two covers. I guess a lot of authors would probably identify with the ups and downs and the resilience required in your career, that it's not a linear climb. And sometimes there are just books where there's no real definable reason why they don't land in the way that you hope. It was just a bit of nobody really knew, a bit of everything. Like my publisher definitely did a lot. I did a lot. There was some readers are very excited, but it was just a very crowded season. Book Talk was changing the landscape of things. Definitely had really big hopes for it, and it was hard to experience not having all of that follow through. So after that, I struggled quite badly with emotional and creative burnout. I'd traveled for the release, so I'd gone overseas. I was just completely worn out, completely creatively worn out, very depressed, very probably just burned out in general and needing a nap or like 10 naps. And I really did have a point where I thought, do I want to continue doing this? Do I want to continue fighting to have a career which is causing so much anxiety and emotional difficulty and is so uncertain, and so much of the things that I want are completely outside of my control. But amongst all of that, I came up with the idea for Tenderly I Am Devoured. So it kind of just demanded to be written, the story, and it really helped me grow as an author. It was a change in direction, I suppose. My earlier books had been kind of dark fantasy, Gothic, and Tenderly I'm Devoured, while it's still a second world setting, it feels a lot more grounded in the real world to me. It's lighter in a way, even though it's horror. I like to call it flower threaded horror. So I think having the disappointment and the experience I did with Unholy Terrors helped me reevaluate what I wanted to write and the direction I wanted to go as an author. So it's been like an up and down experience, but I'm very grateful for what came out of it. So yeah, that's my journey so far. I'm immensely proud of Tenderly I'm Devoured. It's had an overwhelmingly amazing reception from what I thought it would. I honestly had no idea what would happen. I remember writing in my journal, what if no one reads it? What if no one cares? But readers have showed up for this book in ways that I could not imagine. And I feel so, so grateful to all of them. I feel like I'm constantly saying thank you to everyone and how grateful I am, but it's really, really hard for me to express how much it means to me having readers show up for the book and knowing that they've connected with the story in the way that they have. So regardless of where everything goes from here, I'm really, really proud of the book and happy that it came into existence.
Well, I think right now it is just the time for folk horrors and for gothic fantasies. So to hear that today is actually a double release day, including the paperback edition of Unholy Terrors, that is incredible. I am here for it. And I think now is really the time for these genres and this style of writing to really take its hold. We see so many other folk horrors popping up around now as well. And so I think, yeah, it's about timing.
Yeah, it really is. And it was funny because when I sold Lake's Edge, Gothic fantasy wasn't really a big thing. Romantasy wasn't a thing. And there was a few authors. Hannah Witten was releasing For the Wolf around the same time that Lake's Edge was coming out. She and I connected because we both wrote very romance-heavy fantasy stories. Her trilogy, the final installment in that one, The Nightshade God, is coming out in a few weeks after Devoured. So at the time, romance heavy fantasy in traditional publishing wasn't particularly prevalent. But between Lake's Edge and Unholy Terrors, it definitely became more of a thing. And I think Unholy Terrors just didn't have the ability to stand out because there were so many other books that were doing a similar kind of vibe. But then at the same time, the way that I write is very prosy and lyrical and literary. And I think a lot of people picked it up expecting it to be something that it wasn't. And I'm grateful for the chance to have it recovered and released as a paperback, because hopefully people who've loved Devoured will come to the story with an expectation of what it will be and be able to enjoy it in a way that maybe it wasn't enjoyed first time around, because it came out sort of looking like a dark fantasy romance, but it's definitely much more of a fever dream vibes, literary kind of love story in a similar vein to Devoured in a way.
Honestly, describing any book as a fever dream immediately catches my interest. Like, fever dream, got it. It's on my shelf immediately. Like, that's mine. That's for me. Thank you for writing this for me.
But I do think that going back to what you were saying before about folk horror and genre blending in general, I think we are seeing a lot of genre blending type books. A friend of mine, Meg Smitherman, who is an indie author, and she releases the most amazing genre blending romance novellas. She did one called Thrum, which was like a space kind of spaceship alien encounter romance. And she just released one called Swallowed, which was another sort of space exploration where they're traveling to like an undiscovered planet and things get very strange with the plants. And they've had such an amazing reception, which is deserved because Meg is such an amazing writer. But I think there's definitely a hunger for books that are following the very popular trends of romance heavy plots, but doing fresh things with them.
Yes, like blending, obviously we started with romantasy, which blends romance and fantasy. And now we're seeing some more like horror romance, which I've seen as horror rom.
Horror-mance.
Yeah, horror romance. Yep, seen
Yeah.
it that way too, which I love it. I'm so here for it. And I've seen a few like sci-fi romances now too, and I'm just here for it. I want to
I
see all the genres blended. Give me a
I
little bit of
think so too.
everything.
I love it. And I really think it's giving authors the chance to experiment and do interesting things. And yeah, I love how it's opening up things for readers and for authors as well. Not to say that romantasy is at all deficient or there's anything wrong with it. It's more that I love how it's become like a point where everything's evolved from it. It's really brought romance. I mean, even just regular romance, seeing all of the popularity of Ali Hazelwood's books, for example. I think romance in general is becoming very front and center in the bookish world. And I love that because it's just who doesn't love reading about love, in all the different forms. And I think seeing the different directions people can go with is it's really cool.
Romance has been the top-selling genre for many, many years now. In the last few years, I feel like romance has really even brought itself. I mean, it was already at the forefront as because it was already the best-selling genre. But I feel like with things like Book Talk and Bookstagram, and there's so many book podcasts now as well, we really just like have taken romance and taken it not even just at the front of the book world, but it's becoming mainstream to even people who don't really read and who are not bookish and who are not necessarily part of book communities, and kind of bringing those people into book worlds. And then with the genre blending, it allows those readers to experience different styles and different ideas and different genres. And I think that this has been a really great way to get more people reading books, more people supporting authors, and more people exploring different styles of books and different genres.
I agree, and I'm loving it all. It makes me very excited for where the future's going in terms of books. Like we were talking about before we started recording, there's so many amazing books coming out this year. Most of them are all ones that take big risks, doing new things with the blend of genre. There's a lot of horror-mance, there's a lot of fantasy romance, but with like a literary twist to it. It's really lovely, as well as the way that there's a lot of queer stories coming to the forefront as well. And I'm immensely proud of how well the queer rep of Devoured has been received. All of my books have had queer characters, but this is my first time writing a very overtly queer book and being out as a queer author myself. So it's added an extra layer of emotional resonance, I suppose, to the release. I think supporting authors who are from a diverse background is definitely the way forward and should be something that we all do because the stories are fabulous.
So before we finish up, I would like to celebrate your release day with a little bit of a game. I call this game 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we will, just talk about 5 books you've read, 4 genres or tropes that you enjoy, 3 authors you always read, 2 places you love to read, and 1 book that you promise you're going to read soon.
Okay. So 5 books that I've read. Is this just in my entire life or recently
Yeah,
or
like
how?
five that you've loved, you want to recommend.
So I suppose I have to start with Donna Tartt's The Secret History, which, as I've already explained, is my favorite book of all time. I would say Bunny by Mona Awad, but also Rouge by Mona Awad. I think the two of them get to share a spot because I would read anything that she writes. I love her writing so much, and I loved Bunny, and it's such an inspiration. But Rouge, there was just something about it that really, really resonated with me. And I found it so beautiful and this exploration of mother's, daughter's identity, all of these things. So that's definitely one of them. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which ties with Secret History as my favorite book of all time. I've read it so many times, and I'm often shocked at how long ago it was written because it feels so fresh and new, and it just does this thing, which is something that I love when a book does, where you feel like you can't quite see what's happening in the story, but if you reread it or if you just look closer, you'll finally uncover the truth behind what the narrator's telling you. And it's such a wonderful experience as an author. So that's definitely another one that I adore. So my last one would be House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, which is a sapphic vampire horror. And I honestly would read anything Alexis writes. She's such a beautiful writer, but there's just something about House of Hunger that really stuck with me. And I still think about it years after reading. It has this sort of really, really cool spin on, I guess, like an Elizabeth Bathory concept, but done in such a unique way. It's got this sort of community of girls working together to change their fates. There's just so many things about it that I love. So that's my 5.
Okay, now we have four genres or tropes that you love.
I absolutely love enemies to lovers. I think is probably my number one trope. I really love, I guess, genre blending, which is what we've already talked about. So I love anything with kind of a literary leaning. I really, really enjoy literary horror, romantic horror. So yeah, any kind of blended genre, I think, is definitely a favorite. So that's one trope, one genre. Um, I also really love the kind of alliance of convenience trope. So there's so many different ways that you can do it, but whether it's you hate each other, but you have to team up for reasons, or you've got ideological differences, but you have to team up for reasons. Any of that is always a fun thing to explore because when you've got characters with very different personalities forced to work together, that's always super fun. And for the last one, I am really loving books that are kind of those weird Tumblr girl, angry, messy girl kind of vibes. So, like My Dark Vanessa or Lucy Rose's The Lamb, which just came out, which was this very Angela Carter-esque story about a teenage cannibal. I don't know. Anything like that, I'm really loving. Whenever you see like a roundup of like weird girl books, like a Tessa Moshfegh and that sort of thing, I'm a sucker for anything like that.
Oh, yeah. And now three authors you always read.
So 3 authors I always read. One would be Mona Awad, like I already said. I'm so excited that there's a prequel, sequel kind of book for Bunny coming out this fall. I cannot wait. Donna Tartt, obviously. And who else? It's weird because I am such a mood reader, and often a lot of the books I read kind of just maybe Shirley Jackson, even though sadly there's not going to be any new Shirley Jackson books, but I feel like everything she's written is just completely my sort of story.
Now, what are two places that you love to read?
I really love to read on the sofa in my living room when the weather is either like a balmy day where you can have the window open, or if it's cold enough to have a fire in the fireplace. That's definitely one of my favorite places to read. Or in a cafe where it's that perfect blend of not so quiet that you feel awkward sitting there reading, but not so loud that it's hard to focus, I guess. Like maybe an outdoor courtyard at the art gallery cafe or something like that.
Honestly, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I wish I was doing that right now.
Right? All right. What is one book that you promise you're going to read soon?
Oh gosh, I have the biggest TBR, honestly. I feel like I continually add books. I am such a mood reader as well, which makes it's a blessing and a curse because it I found that leaning into that definitely helps avoid reading slumps, but it's hard when there's something that you think I really should read that. I think maybe Babel by R.F. Kuang because everyone talks about it and it intrigues me so much. And I have it, but it's just never quite felt like the right time yet. But I'm also very intrigued by, is it Catabasis? I have no
Yeah.
idea. Yeah, so the new book coming
Hmm.
out by that
I'm
author.
so looking
So
for it.
yeah, so I feel like perhaps the time is this year will be the year that I finally read it.
Yeah, I have read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang and loved it so much that I went and bought literally her entire backlist. And this year I'm working through all of them and I'm so, so excited for her new one coming out. Cannot wait. I put the pre-order in immediately.
It's got kind of like a ninth house sort of vibe, but
Yeah.
I feel the way that it's explored is going to be really, really interesting.
All right, well, Lyndall, thank you so much for joining me today on Must Love Books podcast. I'm so excited to celebrate the release of your paperback edition as well as Tenderly I Am Devoured. So excited to pick that one up. I cannot wait.
I'm so excited too. Thank you for having me, and I hope everybody who picks up a copy will enjoy reading.
Do you have any final words or messages you'd like to share with our listeners?
You can find me online at LK Clipstone, basically the same handle everywhere on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, wherever. And my website is lyndallclipstone.com. So yeah, if you pick up a copy of Devoured, I hope you enjoy reading. Definitely tag me in your posts if you want to share your excitement about it. And thank you all for your support.
And thank you again for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you and happy reading.